now you're getting involved in this lawsuit. That's obviously a fairly unique thing to do. Just like Iraq Veteran 8888 has Eric has gotten involved in that, is more involved as an activist and working with an established gun rights group. Now you're also working with one in this case. What made you decide to get involved in that way?
Well, being in the state of California, a lot of people ask, why don't you just leave? And maybe at some point I will. But in the time being, I wanted to do as much as possible to try to influence the culture. And this is another route to influence the culture by making things easier and more accessible to people. I was really inspired by stuff that Iraq Veteran has been doing with activism, how Military Arms Channel, MAC, has been very active with legislators, and how the team at T-Rex Arms, Isaac and Lucas, have involved themselves in Tennessee. The CRPA is a great organization. They are the reason that we were able to legally acquire magazines during Freedom Week. And I saw that as a great opportunity. I had reached out to some of the lawyers and just interacted with them here and there with Michelle and Associates, who works with the CRPA very closely. So close that Chuck Michelle, from Michelle and Associates, is very high up with the CRPA.
Yes, he's the president.
And,
yes.
Yep. Pretty up there. And the CRPA, some of their lawyers reached out to me asking if I was interested in being a plaintiff. And I thought that was awesome. I really am happy to be a part of this and being able to kind of have some skin in the game when it comes to the actual fight and not just talking about stuff. Yeah,
it's interesting that track record you've described there of sort of the gun tubers becoming real world activists, not just, and not that, obviously commentary is a perfectly legitimate form of activism as well. Not to put down anyone else who's not signing over lawsuits or what have you. But it is interesting to see the evolution of gun tubers into real world activists in a number of different forms, as you mentioned there. The Military Arms Channel has been very vocal in, for instance, NRA reform campaigns or moving to alternatives to the NRA. The gun tuber world has been very vocal in those realms, and not just in sort of supporting causes, but actually getting involved. In them. So I find that's a really interesting evolution of this community. Totally in that way. And so you're a part of that. Now let's talk about the law in particular, what you're challenging here. California has an unsafe, or is a law against the sales of unsafe firearms, right?
There's a list of not unsafe for sale handguns, which is part of the Unsafe Handgun Act, I believe, where in the state of California, if you want to purchase a handgun from a dealer, so not private party, and you are not a cop or one of the ever-growing list of law enforcement departments, you can only buy certain handguns. And I want to be very clear. Handguns, revolvers. When I say handguns, I'm talking about semi-auto handguns. Revolvers, the requirements are a little bit different. But in order to have that firearm be a purchasable firearm that is not unsafe for sale, sorry, I use a lot of Italian sign language.
Yes, there's a lot of quotation marks going on for those who are watching on YouTube. But yes.
So if you want to purchase a handgun, the only handguns that you have available to purchase are handguns that existed prior to, I believe, March of 2013. Many of which were prior to 2007. So if you want a Glock, you are limited to a certain specific models of Generation 3 Glocks, not the ones made in the USA, only the ones made overseas, because they're different models and therefore not approved.
And so what are some of the features that they require in order for a handgun to be approved by this list?
So I alluded to that kind of in the 2007 and then 2013 changes. In 2007, I believe, was when they started requiring loaded chamber indicators and magazine disconnects on semi-auto handguns. So when you have a round in the chamber, there's a little flag that pops up with writing on it. There is very specific requirements to be a legal chamber loaded indicator. and it has to say loaded when up with a little red flag. That's how we see it on, I believe, the Smith & Wesson Shield, very common. Some of the SIG 226 and 220 variants. So basically when there's a round in the chamber, a little flag pops up, making it very clear that there's a round in the chamber. However,
that's interesting. But so it's only that specific kind of loaded chamber indicator? Because obviously a lot of guns have, a cutout where you could see if there's brass in your chamber.
There's specific requirements. Yeah. So, on most Glocks, you can see if it's loaded just by kind of peeking in through the side or seeing how the extractor sits. So many firearms do have loaded chamber indicators, but it's not necessarily the right type of loaded chamber indicator.
Maybe I have a 1911 here from Remington, and they have a little a hole that allows you to see into the chamber, and see whether or not there's
that would not be acceptable, because it is not a little flag that sticks up. I don't have any currently right here with me to grab and show. And then the other feature, the other big one, is the magazine disconnect. So without a magazine inserted into the gun, it won't fire even if there's a round in the chamber, which there's a lot of scenarios. Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios where you could imagine that would be not useful. I imagine many people that have been shooting long enough have shot a gun and the magazine unseats itself, or maybe wasn't seated properly. And that could stop you from being able to pull that trigger when you need to. Those are the two features that I believe they added in 2007. Then in 2013,
this is a much more controversial feature.
Yeah, this one is the one that made it impossible, or nearly impossible to comply with, when they required microstamping. And microstamping is, in essence, they wanted the semi-auto handgun to imprint on the spent casing in two locations a identifiable marking to that gun that could be traced back to the original purchaser of that firearm. It's now been reduced to only one location. Unfortunately, the technology does not exist on any currently purchasable production firearm. So that's why we're stuck with Generation 3 Glocks, because they're not going to add a loaded chamber indicator or a magazine disconnect. And the technology for microstamping does not exist practically on the market. There are firearms that have proven that the technology could be a thing, but it is not reasonably possible. Yeah.
This is like the brainchild of a single guy, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I think we've seen some examples where these smart guns, or these guns that have the technology, they fail. They're just not safe in the sense that they don't function well.